Alright guys, Murph's here. And today, we're going to talk about this. A Marlin Model 30 AW chambered in 30-30 Winchester. Now in order to talk about this, we're going to talk about a little bit of history. Though this is not a terribly historic rifle. Marlin as a company got into the lever action rifle game in the late 1800s. And they would directly compete with Winchester in the form of their 1893 lever action rifle, up against Winchester's Model 94, previously reviewed on the channel, link in the description. These two titans would battle it out for years. However, in the 1950s, Marlin would introduce their Model 336. And the 336 would take off in a big way. One of the things about the 336 is that it would be adapted to optics. Both the 93 and the 336 are side eject models. However, the 336 would start incorporating optics mounts, or at least the provisions to be able to add an optics mount from the factory. And this became very big news because in order to be able to mount a optic on a Winchester Model 1894, you had to go with a side saddle type setup, which put the optic offset to the line of the bore. And this being because the Winchester Model 1894 is a top eject model. The cartridge casings go straight up. Winchester would not address this up until their angled eject model that would come out many years later, where it's still ejecting out of the top. It just does so at a slight angle, but allows you to be able to mount a scope center line with the bore. Now, this rifle is the version of the 336 that Marlin produced specifically for Walmart. This was meant to be the budget offering, the everyman's rifle, something that was accessible by the average person at a price point that they could actually afford. And it's very difficult to track down actual production dates or production information about the Model 30 because Marlin has changed hands quite a few times. Now, it seems to me, based off of what it is that I've read out of forums, that the 90s, solidly in the 90s, was when these rifles were produced. And it's maybe as early as 1989 and as late as 1999, but I can't really pin it down for sure, like production numbers or anything along those lines. Marlin would eventually be bought out by Remington Arms and would be brought into the Freedom Arms Group. They would move the plant from New Haven, Connecticut up to Ilion, New York. And a lot of people, like most of the workers, would not go with that move. They would just stay in Connecticut. As well as a lot of the information seems to have also not made the jump, be it because of mismanagement on Freedom Arms Group's side of things, or just because Remington had no interest in bringing along those factory records. That's unclear to me. What is very clear is that Remington, through Freedom's Arms Group, managed to really besmirch the name of Marlin by producing rifles that had very poor fit and finish and all that kind of stuff. And that's because a lot of the knowledge base for producing these rifles was left in Connecticut, I guess I should say. Now, Marlin has been bought out by Ruger, and it seems that we are back to good fit and finish whenever it comes to the new produced rifles. Now, as far as I know, these rifles were only ever produced in 30-30 Winchester. However, if you have a Model 30 chambered in something else, let me know in the comments section. All right, so with that, why don't we go ahead and get into the features of this particular rifle and talk about how it is different from a 336. First off, we have a 20-inch barrel, which makes this a very light and handy carbine. And long-time viewers of the channel know that I'm a huge fan of light, handy carbines. This rifle has the micro groove rifling in it. What is micro groove rifling? Well, whenever you're talking about traditional cut rifling, you're talking about like 2 to 6 grooves, fairly deeply cut, all that kind of stuff. Micro groove rifling is like 16 grooves, and they're very shallow. And there's a lot of discussion as to the pros and cons of this type of rifling. It seems the general consensus leads towards it's not as big of a positive boost to accuracy in centerfire rifle cartridges, but there's quite a bit of discussion as to the pros of micro groove rifling whenever it is that you're talking about rimfire. Now, something that I have observed, or something that I would think would be true in this case, that you would have an issue with leading in the barrel of a rimfire gun if you spend a lot of time shooting like non-coated bullets or cast ammunition, something along those lines. And it's kind of the same thing that you run into with like Glock polygonal rifling, where because that rifling is so shallow that as you start to build up that layer of leading, that could potentially cause an issue down the line. But I haven't really done enough research into that to see if that is valid or if that's just me projecting, jumping to the wrong conclusions and all that kind of stuff. We have a 6-round magazine tube here. Our front sight is a blade type front sight, which has a brass bead set into it. The idea being that brass bead will help you pick up the sight faster. I can tell you that in actual field conditions, I really don't notice the brass bead. On the 336, this would be a hooded front sight instead of just a blade type front sight. Coming back to our rear barrel band, we have sling swivels. We also have a sling swivel set into the stock. The Model 30 would come standard with sling swivels. Our rear sight is a notch type affair, which is adjustable for both elevation and windage. I've been working on the windage of this rifle quite a bit, and you just tap on this portion here with like a hammer, and it's really kind of a pain because it's very difficult to make very fine changes to the zero with this type of drift adjustment. So like I'll shoot at the target and it'll be on the right side of the target, and then I'm like, oh, okay, that's cool. Well, I'll just tap it over a little bit, and then, you know, I'll be center, and then I'll be on the left side of the target. And I'm just like, what is going on? It's very difficult to get that tuned in there. Now, another change from the Marlin 336 would be walnut furniture. This is birch, a little bit cheaper. Man, we'll talk about that more here as we go along. The finish on this gun, I don't think is as good as like the 336. I feel like it's very shallow. Okay, so the top strap here is not as highly polished as the rest of the finish in order to cut down on glare. And this is also where we have our receiver drilled and tapped in order to be able to accept optics mounts. Our hammer is a spur type hammer, which has some good deep serrations on it. Our bolt is left in the white. We have a side loading gate, which I'm a huge fan of. I do not care for Henry's tubular magazine feed or tubular magazine loading design. I much prefer the side loading gate. However, I will note that this side loading gate is kind of sharp. The edges on this have a tendency to take away little bits of my thumbnail whenever it is that I'm loading this. We do have a crossbolt safety, and there's a lot of people who get very upset about lever action rifles having crossbolt safeties, and I don't get it because I feel like it's the same crowd and demographic that tell you that like all handguns have to have safeties on them, but they don't want a crossbolt safety on a lever action rifle. And a lot of times they cite that you have a half cock position, that is your safety, as well as you have the grip safety, because we have a small pin right behind the trigger right here, which is engaged by the lever whenever it's closed to make sure that the gun is in battery before it goes off. I don't have an issue with the crossbolt safety. It's actually in a really good spot to where if I do have the gun cocked, I'm out in the field, it's very easy for me to turn off that crossbolt safety on my way to mounting the gun. We have Marlin's gold trigger here. The lever on this is not smooth. Sometimes it gets a little stiff, a little gummy. This is definitely not some highly polished, super slicked up setup here. That's for sure. Okay, now on the stock I have the shell carrier. That's absolutely useless. I don't know why I still have it. You'll notice here we have a little bit, it might be a little bit difficult to pick up on the camera, but I promise you it's there. We have a little bit of wiggle in this buttstock. We're going to talk about this more once we get into shooting. And then on the back of the buttstock here, we have our rubber recoil pad. That's pretty stiff, but I don't think it hurts or helps the rifle in this case. I'm not particularly recoil shy, so I don't find this to be a detriment at all. Now we do have this semi-pistol grip, which is my favorite for being able to pull the rifle into my shoulder. I comment on that with every gun, shotgun, or rifle that has a semi-pistol grip. Huge fan of that. All right, guys. That's features. Let's go ahead and get into shooting. Now, guys, I grew up with 30-30 lever action rifles. I grew up with a Marlin Model 336 and this gun for that matter. And when I was a kid, I used to get pushed around pretty hard by the recoil. Now that I'm older, I've got a little bit more mass going on here and all that kind of stuff. The gun is not like an absolute pleasure to shoot. There's still definitely recoil, but it is not a bore to shoot. Like, I have no issue being able to get through a whole magazine in this gun or multiple magazines through this gun and still be fine the next day. Now, I mentioned some of the issues that I was having with getting this gun like perfectly aligned on paper, which, keep in mind, guys, I'm a perfectionist, so that is something I'm going to stress out about. But I did do some accuracy shooting, and I managed to get this 2 7/8 inch group at 100 yards with Remington core locked 170 grain soft points, which this rifle seems to really like that load. 2 7/8 inch group with iron sights on what is most definitely not a precision rifle. I'd say that's pretty decent. That's definitely beyond minute of deer. And when you consider that the 30-30 is kind of a 200-yard cartridge, this gun will be more than capable of putting a round into the boiler room on pretty much any whitetail that you want to take at those distances. So the rifle's performing just fine there. However, I have had some malfunctions here recently, and I've been very confused by it. I was shooting some footage for an upcoming comparison video that'll be dropping here in the next couple of weeks, a little teaser for you. And I found I was shooting around cover at one point, and I had a click no bang. So I jacked that round out of the chamber, kept on going with that course of fire, inspected the round afterwards, and found that it had a very light primer strike on it. Put that round back in the magazine, fired it off just fine. I took it out this weekend to see if I could replicate the issue, or see if I ran into it again while I was shooting some accuracy type stuff, and I did have it occur yet again. We'll show that footage here. So as we can see, it had a click no bang and a very light primer strike. The round went a second time. And I'm not sure what's causing that, but I have a couple of theories. One, something you might have noticed as I was sitting here messing around with the rifle. So we can see there, that hammer fell just fine. However, whenever I decock the hammer manually, we'll note that I have pressed the trigger. I had held back on the hammer while pressing the trigger with the intention of riding it home. And when I let go of it, it has not continued to move. However, when I touch it, it goes into the half-cock position. I'm wondering if something's rubbing inside of the mechanism that is slowing down that hammer and sometimes taking out all of its force before it strikes the firing pin to be able to get that good solid primer strike. In addition to that, I wonder if the wiggle of the stock has something to do with either slowing down the trigger or perhaps affecting the engagement of the grip safety, and maybe that's what's causing the hammer to slow down just a little bit, just taking enough gas out of it in order for it to not get that solid primer strike. I'm not sure which it is. It's something I'm gonna have to investigate more thoroughly. Keep in mind, guys, I'm not a gunsmith, so I'm definitely an amateur when it comes to that kind of stuff. This is just what I'm observing as I handle and shoot the rifle. All right, guys, that's shooting. What are my recommendations when it comes to this particular rifle? Would I recommend this for duty type use? Absolutely not. If you're in a duty type capacity where you need a rifle, you should be running some type of semi-auto. AR, even an AK, any number of modern tactical rifles are going to be more efficient and more effective for your purposes than any lever action rifle, regardless of what upgrades you put on it. So no, I do not recommend this for duty type use. Absolutely not. What about for self-defense, home defense? Okay, there's a couple things we have to take into account here. First off, once again, semi-automatic rifles are going to be better options for you. If you were to use this for home defense, it's better than a sharp stick. If this is the only long gun you had, and I would prefer to see long guns used for home defense type purposes, then yes, absolutely, this would be a good choice. You could upgrade it and all that kind of stuff with new rails and everything to be able to make it better suited to this goal. However, something to keep in mind is we're talking about a full power rifle cartridge. There's going to be an issue with overpenetration. So if you live in a densely packed area, be it an apartment or just like a neighborhood where everyone's like right on top of each other, like kind of where I live now, yeah, that'd be a problem. You don't want to do that. You could potentially wind up killing your neighbor or something along those lines. Or if you have family members in the home, that is something else you have to keep in mind. So I could use this for home defense if I wanted to, because I have shooting lanes that don't necessarily wind up with me shooting a neighbor. Not everyone has that type of luxury, and that's something you have to pay attention to whenever you're selecting a home defense tool. Now, for self-defense, if you're talking about like out and around town, having this as a truck gun or something along those lines, I prefer to see telescoping or side-folding stocks whenever it is that we're talking about truck guns. This is short and light enough that you could do this if you wanted to, but I would not preference this for that purpose. And then whenever it is that you're talking about the armed and prepared citizen, the true purpose of the Second Amendment, I would not recommend this rifle because it's getting kind of close to the same duty parallel unless you lived in a location where you could not get semi-automatic rifles. At which point, yeah, you're going to have to work with whatever it is that you got and accessorize and try to optimize it for that purpose as best you can given the restrictions that you have. I don't love this idea, and I hope you're trying to use your voice in order to be able to get your rights back, or maybe it's time to move to somewhere where you can just go ahead and have your rights. But regardless, there's a lot of stuff that impacts that. We're not going to get down that rabbit hole. Okay, so what about for competition use? Absolutely not. This in no way is going to perform well in any competition. It's not legal for like cowboy action shooting, and it wouldn't be a good PRS option. I wouldn't take this to a 3-gun challenge. I would not take this anywhere in any of those types of dynamic shooting sports and expect to do well. You could do it. It's going to be expensive because the ammunition's not cheap and you're going to wind up shooting a lot of it, and your times are going to suffer. But if you're just looking to go out there and have fun, sure. If you could find a dedicated lever action rifle competition, sure, whatever. But if we're talking about like competitions that already exist, like recognized like national matches and stuff like that, I would not take this rifle. Okay, well, what about as a hunting rifle? Well, other than my current reservation that I have with this rifle because I'm having reliability issues, absolutely. The lever action 30-30 Winchester has put more meat on the table than any other rifle in the world. Which, if you want more information on the 30-30 Winchester cartridge, go ahead and check out the link in the description to the video I did discussing it. But this is a fantastic brush gun. This will be able to handle anything in North America as long as you're willing to get close enough to it. Because this being such a short-range rifle, it does peter out on energy rather rapidly. Some of the really big game, you might have to shoot inside of 100 yards. And depending on what it is, you may or may not want to get within 100 yards of that particular animal. But brush gun, light, handy setup like this would be absolutely amazing in areas of dense foliage and all those types of things. This cartridge and rifle combination would really knock it out of the park. Okay, what about as a woods gun? Well, if you're talking about like hiking or something along those lines, I don't recommend any rifle for that. But if you're talking about taking something for defense while camping, or you're out bebopping around your property or something along those lines, yeah, this wouldn't be a bad choice. You can take out any varmint that you needed to as long as you were close enough. You could take some pot shots at stumps or something along those lines as you're out working around your property. And then also, if it happens to be deer season, you got a tag to fill and you're out doing chores and happen upon a deer, this would be a great option for that. Because again, you're not dedicatedly hunting. So it's something that's going to be within the visual sight range, and your iron-sighted rifle is definitely going to support that, even more so if you do pop an optic on this thing. All right, guys, those are my recommendations. What are my uses for this rifle? Well, currently this rifle's benched up until I figure out what's going on with the reliability of it. Prior to that, this has been a hunting rifle. No, I've not taken any game with it. I have taken this thing afield before. My intention at some point is to put a red dot on here because I think this would be a really awesome pig gun, and I would love to go pig hunting with it. But again, reliability's got to get sorted out first. Now, something I forgot to mention before, this is a JM stamped barrel, which ostensibly for collectors of Marlin lever action rifles is big news. However, an important thing to keep in mind with all that is, like, this was a budget rifle. This was not an expensive gun when it first came out. It's not necessarily appreciated that much either. The only thing that makes this rifle desirable is it has that JM stamp. But that does not suddenly turn this probably $400 gun with the stamp into a $900 gun or something along those lines. Like 400 is probably about, like, these are not expensive guns. These are a great pickup if you're wanting to have a JM stamped Marlin and you want a decent rifle, current reliability misgivings notwithstanding. All right, guys, those are my recommendations. What are competitive offerings out on the market? Well, finding a budget lever action rifle right now is not very easy. The closest you can get is like Rossi. So if you're looking for similar, like, application, you're looking at a Marlin Model 336 or a Winchester Model 94. If you're looking for the same chambering, if you're looking for the same overall, like, lightweight and layout and all that kind of stuff, those are the types of guns that you're looking at that point. All right, guys. I think that pretty much covers my thoughts on this particular subject. I hope you guys found this interesting, and it's pretty much what I got. Have a good day.